We're going to begin now. So welcome everyone. My name is David Levine, and I am the president and co-founder of the American Sustainable Business Council. And it's my pleasure on behalf of Ecopreneur EU, the European Sustainable Business Federation, and the American Sustainable Business Council to welcome you here today to this side event on driving public policy to create a circular economy in the EU and North America. You know, our frame was that public policy is key in creating large-scale change towards a circular economy. In this session, we're going to explore how shifts in business practices, new innovations, and catalyzing our power, right? This is key for us. How do we use our voice and power as businesses in order to create the change that's needed to address the issues around incentivizing a circular economy, around post-consumer and biodegradable materials and reduction of waste? And what are the campaigns that are presently underway? And what are different businesses doing to support these efforts? And then even more importantly for us, you know, is how do we work collaboratively to influence the change that we need? And so we're really glad that you could join us. And this is really the first public collaboration between, you know, Ecopreneur EU and the American Sustainable Business Council. For those that are not familiar, Ecopreneur EU, or the European Sustainable Business Federation, sets a course towards sustainable economic policies on the European level, you know, to support the economic and societal transformation across Europe and beyond. They've formed a partnership, you know, in the European Union to allow for collaborations, joint initiatives, memberships, and campaign. The American Sustainable Business Council is a council of business organizations and companies that come together to advance market solutions and public policies to support a just and sustainable economy. You know, formed in 2009, we and our organizational members represent over 250,000 businesses across sectors, across geographies in the United States. And we're using that business voice and power to actually drive on key issues such as circular economy, climate and energy, regenerative agriculture, race and equity, sustainable economic development, safer chemicals and supply chains, all to build a more just and sustainable and regenerative U.S. economy. So just 3 months ago, we formed this official partnership between the American Sustainable Business Council, you know, and Ecopreneur EU. And so we are real pleased to be here today. So as I mentioned, the program is in the chat, you know, and we're going to go through the presentations, but feel free to put your questions, you know, into the chat, and then we will get to them. We've left hopefully ample time, as all speakers are going to stay on their time, their allotted time, as we move through the program. But what we're hoping is that this really, you know, in and of itself, you know, will be shared with many others after today, but also will be a great opportunity for us to look forward to how we can drive this partnership between the EU, you know, and the US, you know, led by responsible, sustainable, you know, businesses that could really drive the change that we so desperately need at this point in history. So with that, you know, we're going to begin the official part of the program, and I'm going to turn now to my colleague, Thomas Oppel, the Executive Vice President of the American Sustainable Business Council. Thomas?
Thanks, thanks, David, and thanks to everybody who's here as participants and of course our co-hosts. We're really excited about the work that the cooperation here. Clearly, plastic waste in general, solving all of these problems is a global issue. It's not one for any one jurisdiction in the United States or in North America or in the Western Hemisphere. It's truly a global problem, and so cooperation is both a key to to solving all of these problems, as well as part of the principles that a working group that ASBC has established with many of our business partners and organizational partners to begin to evaluate the kinds of policies that we want to promote, that we can support here in the United States. We spent a considerable amount of time in the last year working on those principles. As Mark Twain once famously said, when he'd written this very long letter, he said he would have written a shorter letter, but he didn't have enough time. The key, we thought, to the principles was getting a relatively short list of principles as core fundamentals to move federal policy. And we came up with 4 principles that we are using. The first being materials circularity, trying to encourage businesses to stop using materials that end up in our landfills or end up being burned or end up in our oceans. And to really innovate in terms of creating materials that could be reused, recycled appropriately. The second principle, and this is the global notion, is shared responsibility. We recognize that business must play a key role here, and that's why the American Sustainable Business Council exists. But we also recognize that there's got to be a role played by governments and frankly by consumers. We've got to impact consumer behavior in order to really get a grip on this problem. The third principle is the notion of trying to accelerate a circular market through incentives, through examining what people have already done and building on best practices, and really again sort of establishing the idea that we know we can't solve the problem in one day, but we also know that we must start to solve the problem today. And the last principle is the principle of transparency and communication, of making sure that people understand what is recyclable, what is compostable, that the rules are simplified and make it easier for consumers and users, the end users, to make sure that in fact they're not end users, that they use a product and that the packaging, the material around it can be returned, recycled, reused, repurposed. That has been the thrust of our effort in our working group. We're now working very closely with both state and federal policy makers, federal legislators. There is a measure before Congress right now called the Break Free from Plastics Act that we have been very supportive of. It's not perfect, but it is a great first start. The bill was introduced, unfortunately, shortly before the real pandemic hit, and so action has been slow to non-existent for the last few months. But we are hopeful that with hopefully a change in leadership, that there will be opportunities for that bill to move forward and for real action to take place in the United States, which unfortunately for the last few years has stepped away from a participatory role in many of these issues. We're hoping that we can help lead that change. And part of that effort is sort of making the business case again for why these are important. And I will say the simplest summation that I have seen was a sign that was carried during the youth climate strike back in 2019. And the sign said simply, "There are no jobs on a dead planet." I don't think you can sum up the message any more clearly than that. We are clearly changing the climate, and the role of plastics, the role of waste generally, we're burying ourselves in it. And that clearly needs to change. We're also working with many states. California in particular has taken a leadership role, and they came close to passing a circular economy bill in 2019. A unexpected and unrelated legislative disruption caused an early adjournment of the California legislature, but we expect, again, their legislative session this year was disrupted by the pandemic, but we expect that in 2021, that initiative will begin again. And in the United States, as so often is the case, California is taking a leadership role. So those are just some examples of the kind of work that we're doing at the federal and state level in the U.S. On the issue of plastic pollution reduction and waste reduction generally. So I'll turn it back over to David.
Thank you, Thomas. And again, if folks, have questions, we'll get to that at the end, but you're welcome to put it in the chat. So next, I'm going to turn to Arta ten Wolde, the Executive Director of Ecopreneur EU. Arta.
Yes, thank you, David. And also on behalf of Ecopreneur, which you already introduced, I very much welcome our collaboration with the ASBC, and also the fact that this is the first public thing that we do together. And also, I'm very glad of all the participants in this meeting. So I will try to also stick to the 5 minutes and tell you something about what is going on in Europe and what Ecopreneur is trying to do. So we are the European Sustainable Business Federation, and we are representing over 3,000 companies. So that's considerably less than in the United States. On the other hand, we are also a younger organization. We started in 2016, and it's a different context. So our 3,000 companies are mainly SMEs. I mean, 2,900 SMEs, more or less, and about 100 larger companies in 6 member states. So these are Germany, France, Austria, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Sweden. And we have a board consisting of these 6 members, and we also have an advocacy group. That's, by the way, the only working group that we have at this moment, consisting of 5 companies that directly help us spend time on our advocacy, because that's what we mainly do. We do advocacy at the EU level to try and influence EU policies through contacts with the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the Council, as well as many stakeholders such as the European Environmental Bureau and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and many others. And we do that by advocacy contacts, normally in Brussels, now online, but also by producing reports, for instance, on the circular economy and on circular textiles. We also put a circularity check online that every company globally can use for free to check if your product or service is circular, and if so, how circular. We also do projects. We did a project on textiles. We'll do another one, and we'll start one on life cycle analysis. And then about the principles and about the companies and our members. And so this is very similar, actually. Everything that was mentioned about the ASBC, we could also say that coincide with our principles. And we formulated like that our companies and members are committed to deliver sustainable products and services, to create a sustainable economy, to accelerate that. That is the goal of Ecopreneur. So triple P, triple bottom line, the sustainable development goals are for us leading, and this is also reflected in the criteria for membership of Ecopreneur, and also the criteria for membership of companies joining our members, because our direct members are business networks. SMEs and companies can become somehow a member of Ecopreneur if they are represented in Europe, either indirectly via our national members or via our company advocacy group. So what else should I say about this? I think it's important to say that we have identified from the start barriers for going towards a low carbon circular economy, because that's also our goal. And some of these barriers that especially SMEs, but also larger companies experience are a lack of demand pool, first of all, a lack of demand for low carbon circular products and services. Also, a lack of transparency, exactly mirroring the principle of the ASBC. Also, lack of access to funding. And then there are actually many more, like the complexity of a circular design and also many regulatory barriers. So now, as Ms. Joanna Drake will inform us in a few minutes, the European Union is actually looking very much forward and has published a Green Deal and a Circular Economy Action Plan and an SME strategy that are very forward-looking, and we welcome that. At the same time, we also have many things that we would like to be implemented in a way that will actually help SMEs go forward. And for instance, very important right now is that there will be an EU Green Recovery Plan that is linked, so linking the Green Deal and a green economy, and also sustainable economy, by the way, including the social part, with green strings attached to 100% of the EU budget and state aid. Because so far, SMEs in most countries, as we can oversee it, have been not supported nearly as much as multinationals. And so we want to avoid the lock-in into the old fossil fuel economy. We welcome the overall ambition and many elements, but we would like more attention to enable the full potential of SMEs, for instance, by circular acceleration houses, as we call it, helping SMEs and municipalities in all EU regions. More attention to economic incentives, already mentioned, like extended producer responsibility schemes that could be much improved and extended. Also circular procurement and an effective carbon border adjustment mechanism and tax measures. So those are the incentives. And then also we ask for innovation funding and subsidies, and for implementing progressive EU legislation like a ban on landfilling and also minimum requirements for circular design for all end products. Okay, well, I hope this was more or less in my time. So I'm giving the word back to David.
Thank you, Artur. Let's see. So Joanna is actually joining us now. So she'll come on and she'll get to speak to you all momentarily. Let's see, as soon as she gets on, and then Joanna, welcome. Your timing is perfect. If you're ready, as soon as you connect to audio, we will turn to you. We'll give her a second here. Okay. Joanna, if possible, we'd like to now turn to you.
Hi.
Welcome.
Yep.
So welcome, and it is your turn on the agenda if you're ready. I know you just joined. Are you ready to present?
I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry, but I really... Okay.
Okay.
Yes, we can see you now.
Want me to start?
Yes, please. Yes. So now I'd like to,
You want me to start?
yes, I'd like to turn to
Okay.
Joanna Drake, the Deputy Director General, the European Commission, DG Environment. Joanna, welcome.
To all of you, to the panel, to yourself, and also to all the participants of all my late arrival. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Ecopreneur. I want to thank Vancouver, Helsinki, and the American Sustainable Business Council for organizing this side event. I think as policy makers on both sides of the Atlantic, I think we're living at very challenging times. while doing business, while ensuring that we have always innovative business models, we also have to ensure that we take care of citizens' well-being. And for that, we need to mobilize all our resources into shifting towards an economic model that is rethought, that protection and restoration. I'll just give you a few scientific facts, very recent facts. More than 90% of biodiversity loss and water stress comes from resource extraction and processing. We have an annual waste generation which will increase by 70% this year. And in the world, the whole world, only 12% of our materials used by the EU industry come from recycling. But the problem is that we only have one planet Earth. But in fact, we are behaving as if, and producing and consuming as if we have 3 planets Earth for our disposal. So if you look at the Green Deal, if you look at the Circular Economy Action Plan, of which of course it lies at the core of the Green Deal, and if we also contextualize these into the pandemic, we realize that global problems require truly global solutions. And of course, our environment, our climate, they are still there. And to ensure the resilience and also sustainable growth after the crisis is the European Green Deal. It is in fact being labeled as, it has the overarching ambition of making Europe climate neutral by 2050. We know we can build better. We know we can be bounce back more resilient. We need a growth model that actually respects both of these. And at the same time, we need to accelerate our structural transitions in key areas like energy, like transport, like buildings, industry, and agriculture. The European Union is supporting this agenda with a comprehensive package of about 1.8 billion euros, which actually combines the EU budget and the extraordinary recovery effort under the Next Generation EU. So at least we'll go get of climate-related projects, while all the projects, the 100% of the funds need to comply with this principle of do no significant harm. Our insurance in nature is our life insurance, in fact. The plan of the European Union recognizes also the fundamental role that the nature plays in our society and economy. And at the core of the Green Deal, as I said before, is the circular economy, a model with the potential to make our society more resilient, our economy more sustainable, and our citizens and the environment healthier. The case of the circular economy from the economic point of view is the one that I really would like to stress for you today. It is indeed an opportunity for the global economy. Circular economy helps create new business opportunities through innovative and more efficient production methods. And in the wider economic context, circularity can also be expected to have a positive net effect on GDP and on job creation at the local and to change business model, but as well as for the developing ones. And I'll explain why. The circular economy could help developing economies to generate employment, new types of jobs, and also to reduce their exposure to volatility in raw materials prices. But at the same time, it helps to avert some of the major pressures facing developing countries. And we know that health and environmental effects from unmanaged waste, for instance, are more exponential in developing countries. And of course, this would have, therefore, a clear benefit in terms of reduced air, water, and soil pollution. You may have followed or not have followed the speech of our President, Ursula von der Leyen, and the State of the European Union. And during her intervention, she said that the present crisis is indeed an opportunity to make change happen, be all joined up by design as well. And this is the only way we can make it a reality. So the action plan announces a sustainable policy legislative initiative, which will address products placed in the market. So we are calling it the products policy. The aim behind this is to help these products become new products in terms of extension of lifetime, in terms of what, in other words, less, and also the content, the composition of these products to be derived more and more from manufacturing. Percent of environmental impacts are phase, and this is why I emphasize the by design as being the two key words. Success of the existing legislation that we have had, the eco-design legislation, and we have to establish a set of sustainability principles applicable to all products. And in this way, both the European Union and the US are in a position, or would be in a position, to use that, even if it is the early movers themselves are the ones to set the standards. But of course, we have to work together with the major trading partners, with enforcement authorities, to ensure that regulatory obstacles are addressed. But at the same time, that a level playing field with regard to eco-design rules and environmental protection, eliminating competitiveness concerns. In conclusion, the message I want to share with you is this. In order to leave this crisis behind us and build a stronger and more resilient future, we need to change how we produce, how we consume. We need to avoid waste altogether. And when it is not possible, we need to use our business's leading position and breakthrough innovations to boost products made of high quality recycled materials. Today's challenges require all of our ambition and creativity on the future of circular economy as an agenda for systemic change by design. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Drake. Really appreciate those comments, and particularly about the potential for the collaboration. And so next up, and I see a few questions coming in, so please feel free to keep adding those, and we'll get to those after the presentations. Next up, it's my pleasure to introduce Martin Wolf, the Director of Sustainability and Authenticity at Seventh Generation. So Martin, please.
Thank you, David. And because I was having some connectivity issues while listening to Deputy Director General Drake, I'm going to turn off my video and hopefully the audio will be clear. Seventh Generation is a medium-sized enterprise in the United States. We were acquired by Unilever and remain an independent subsidiary effective 2016, and are now available, our products are now available in over 30 countries worldwide. Our products are primarily cleaning products, such as laundry detergents, dish cleanup liquids, and surface cleaners, but we also make baby diapers, menstrual products, and other various home goods. The mission of our company is to create a sustainable, healthy, and equitable world for the next 7 generations. And we try to engage in business practices to fulfill that mission. And an important aspect of this, and something we must all recognize, is that no one entity, especially a small or medium-sized business, can make global changes on its own. This is an enterprise that we must all engage in. And so we have a model that, one, requires us to create a sustainable business model. 2, to demonstrate the success of that business model by the success of our business. And having done that, 3, allows us to advocate and inspire with authority so that we are joined by other companies, we can present before legislative bodies, and hopefully together make substantial and sustainable change in the world. The sustainable business model that we use is one based on circularity. We want all of our products and packaging to either be reusable and from used sources, to be recyclable and made from recycled materials, and to be bio-based and to be biodegradable, so that we rely on nature's cycles to make the materials available after use. To succeed, particularly in that last approach, it is necessary that we not degrade nature's systems because, as I said, we are relying on them. Thus, we must seek carbon balance. We must make sure that our water withdrawals are balanced by water recharge. We cannot degrade the water we are using and discharge contaminated water back into the environment. And we must make sure that in our agriculture and in our forestry, the ecosystems on which those enterprises depend are not degraded. We look for what is called regeneration in the ecosystem or in the agricultural system or in the forestry system from which we obtain materials. Most importantly, or perhaps not most importantly, but equally importantly, is we cannot degrade the socioeconomic system in which we are participating. Most companies have very linear material models, i.e. the take, make, and discard model, but they also have very linear economic models, our sales, our costs, our profit. That is not sufficient. We need to look at the circular flow of money from our company to our employees, to the companies from which they purchase, to their employees, on and on. And it is only if we can maintain our circular environmental systems and our circular socioeconomic systems can we truly succeed as a civilization. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will turn it back to David.
Thank you, Martin. And as you can see, we've got, two companies today that are in similar markets. And so it's my pleasure now, to turn it to Timothy. Timothy Glaz is the head of corporate affairs for Werner and Mertz. So Timothy, please welcome your remarks.
Thank you, David. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for having me. Yes, there's some parallels to Martin. As a company, Werner and Mertz is producing also detergents, also some shower gels since a little bit over a year. We are a fifth generation family business, founded in 1867. A long tradition that practically also or automatically includes the vision of sustainability, because the owner and the sole owner of the company has two children, and he wants to pass over the company in a very well shape and also as a sustainable model to his children. So there's a lot of commitment towards being holistically sustainable, which basically not only includes the product and the packaging, it obviously also includes the way we produce with 100% renewable energy. The office building and Energy Plus building, LEED Platinum certified. We've been Cradle to Cradle certified for, I don't know, it's about maybe 10 years or so. We have products, we have over 50 products Cradle to Cradle certified, which is a very holistic approach. So I think we are very much committed to the idea of sustainability, of circularity in every direction. And we're very happy to be a member of Ecopreneur also, because we think it's extremely important to have this network of companies that are going the same direction. We are pioneers in several areas. I wouldn't kind of focus on the packaging. We develop closed loop solutions from post-consumer waste streams that are mixed collections in Germany and special dedicated packaging collections, but basically it's a mixed collection, and nothing out of that was really used in a high quality application. We can say we have like 50 to 60%, which is automatically incinerated, always with energy recovery as it's called, but basically there's no closed loop solution. So there's over 2 million tons that are yeah, more or less end in a linear kind of treatment. And we thought that would be necessary to break up this linear approach, and developed a collaborative round table solution with partners of the value chain. And basically we developed solutions for PET bottles, for HDPE bottles, and also for stand-up pouch packaging. So what we're looking for is partners in these applications. We would be really happy if other companies would join in on that. Well, the problem is they're not joining because it's too expensive. It doesn't really make a big difference per packaging, but it does make a difference if you scale. So basically what we would need is a framework that, in a way makes virgin material a little bit more expensive. Right now with COVID, we have a price gap of about 30% for packaging material from virgin sources or from post-consumer recycled sources. So that's really a challenging situation, and I would be really happy if that could change. And maybe the last thing that I would want to point out is, nevertheless, it's always very good reason to start and to really not just wait for the whole kind of framework to be there. We're pioneers. We already brought 400 million bottles made out of 100% post-consumer recycled material into the market. So we're selling these products. We're accepting a slightly higher price for the packaging. But again, it's something that is manageable. But it's not a level playing field, and we're not going to solve the problem of plastics in the environment, plastics being burnt, if we don't find a solution to create this level playing field. And for that we need a clear also a legal framework, and we need incentives, and we need collaboration, and we need companies that really go forward. And until now, these companies, at least for what we are doing, do not exist. And that's a little bit sad, but we will not stop going in that direction. But we think that it's really worthwhile exploring opportunities. And for that, I would like to hand it back to David. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Timothy. And so for folks, again, that want to add some questions there, let's take one of the last ones. Ms. Drake, I think you started to respond in the chat, but the question of, what do businesses think about regulations to improve energy efficiency and manufacturer warranty requirements of household appliances and consumer goods, and what kind of policies, I guess, do we need to see in place in order to address that? So, Ms. Drake, would you like to start us first on that?
You mean on the last question?
Yes, please. Yeah, so if you want to give
on the last
voice
question
to it.
or on the
Yes,
categories?
Please. Yes.
Well, I mean,
yes, please.
as I said earlier, we have to be joined up on this one. And these minimum recycling contact, etc. I mean, I'll give you one example. I would say that, as I said in my speech, early movers set the standards, and this would apply also to policymakers. Let's take the case of plastics, for instance. When we were active on this last year, we've been engaged. Why? Because there was already a call for citizens, from the citizens to act, and they themselves wanted to show that they are aligned to the global ambition alternative. So I think the catch here is that we need to improve this dynamic. We need to get more momentum on this dynamic that's already there. and to push it forward, with more investments in the right direction. And I think the European Union has given a good signal with the Next Generation EU and also the reinforced budget to engage very directly with the member states to help spend from this budget should be.
Great. And I'm wondering, Mr. Your sound comes in and out a little bit, unfortunately. But Thomas or Martin, I'm wondering if you would like to address some of those thoughts from the U.S. perspective.
Certainly. First, I'll thank the Deputy Director General for her efforts and the efforts of the entire EU Commission to bring forth this green plan for the EU. And I look forward to the day when the entire North America and indeed the rest of the world will join the EU in recognizing the importance of having an economic playing field that requires those levels of circularity and efficiency. I also like to point out that there is a difference between efficiency and circularity, that efficiency just allows you to be unsustainable for a bit longer. So while efficiency is extremely important because it enables you to become circular with less effort, it is not sufficient. So yes, we need more efficient appliances so there is less of an energy demand so that we can create more renewable energy to power those appliances, but it is not a big burden as if we had inefficient appliances. Similarly, many people talk about packaging efficiency, lightweighting the packaging. Again, if the packaging is not circular, you can be unsustainable a bit longer, but that's not, nor should it be, our objective. So we truly need to think in terms not merely of efficiency, but of true circularity. And be efficient because that makes all of our efforts easier, but ultimately also be circular.
I was just going to say that at least in our working group, we have focused less on the specifics of, for example, minimum recycling content or something like that, and sort of gone to broader the broader principles to evaluate any legislation. Unfortunately, I think our experience is when you set minimum recycling content, whenever you set minimums, what ends up happening is it's not a floor, it's a ceiling. And so our goal really is, as Martin was just talking about, is really to promote the idea that, we get to 100% of materials circularity. And so, we try to evaluate everything from that standpoint. So, for example, we're talking in our principles about prioritizing material reuse and promoting the collection of recyclables and compostables separate from the solid waste stream, incorporating the highest levels of recovered materials, minimizing the environmental impact through production, use, and recovery, obviously avoiding the use of any substances classified as exhibiting toxicity, and when not reusable, we design, we're recommending designing for controlled recovery options of either recycling or composting and causing minimal harm if accidentally leaked into the environment. So, we're looking to set the highest possible standards and not a floor. So that's the approach that we're taking.
Can I comment on that?
Yes, please, Timothy.
Thomas, I fully agree. That's exactly our point, because we think 100% is the ceiling and not the minimum content. So that's something that in the political debate, it's very difficult to put that standpoint clear, because the majority of the industry says hey, already minimum content is the ceiling for us. We cannot get higher than. We have a lack and a lack of support or supply. But that gives the totally wrong signal to the market. Because the owner of our company, Rainer Schneider, said, it's like the Olympics. Who wants to go for fourth place? Everybody wants to go for the gold medal. And so that's that really creates innovation. That really creates a new kind of, it's a competition. Basically, and that's good. It's a competition for the best. And so again, I think these 100% should absolutely be something that also the European Commission should look into. I know that I raised this idea once in a while when I come into discussions with the European Commission, and they're a little bit reluctant because and I understand the industry, the rest of the industry is putting extreme pressure on them not to put the bar too high. So, but that shouldn't be our concern. And maybe one last comment to Martin. The thing about efficiency and I missed the other one. I think it leads also to innovation. If you don't look into efficiency, you look into new solutions, which means not creating less bad, but really creating something new that also gives a totally new kind of starting point. And I think that's something that we should also always strive for. And if you take this 100% example, then that's something that sometimes comes out of it. If you want to make 100%, then maybe you have to take a completely new way.
David, if I could just follow up on Timothy's point, let me just recommend this. If you had not seen this, and I will put the link in the chat, but there was a great piece in the Harvard Business Review in April of this year, making the business case for circularity, and several of the points, Timothy, you just made were made in that article. That look, the notion here is the more we push for circularity. As a business, you're going to drive innovation, which is going to, obviously lead to new products, new markets, new opportunities. You're going to reduce your operational costs. You're going to reduce your capital costs. You're going to mitigate risk. So, the longer term, if you're taking, and we hope obviously everybody who's thinking sustainably is taking the longer term. The longer term view is to mitigate that risk that plastic pollution contributes to, destroying our environment, advancing climate change, improper climate change, etc. And the last thing is, you're gonna, as seventh generation has incredibly demonstrated, you're gonna win new customers and you're gonna increase your loyalty, because people, particularly younger people, millennials and younger folks, are looking for companies with this kind of commitment to their future. So, I'll put both the principles and that the ASBC working group has come up with more detail, and a link to this article that I found just incredibly helpful.
Great, thanks. So another question on the minimum recycling content. Could it work as a first-line temporary measure to break the linear systems and create at least some demand for secondary raw materials? Does anyone want to take that?
Well, if I can comment on this and also on the previous discussion. So yes, I also fully recognize what was just being said. I want to add to that Ecopreneur has detailed positions on the Eco Design Directive, so on the minimum requirements for design. But this current directive is only focusing on energy and is now being extended to also the resource part, the materials part. But it's very important that that it should become like indeed a race to the top. And this could, for instance, be done by setting higher standards and by taking for that the best practices from SMEs, like in the membership of Ecopreneur, because that is something I did not say yet. That what we see is that there are some larger companies which are really moving up front, but mostly it's the SMEs that can develop much faster solutions. So if you take these best practices and then give the rest of the group a few years to meet that standard. Then you create a race to the top by standards. And in addition to that, it's important to recognize that there is a lot of improvement in the current linear economic system. But as Ms. Drake already said, we need to move to a circular system. And that means that if you now start to innovate as an SME, you can, or a larger company, you can really be successful in a niche market, and our members are successful in niche markets. But if you want to scale up to the whole economy, we need economic incentives, and that creates a market, and that creates the real race to the top.
Right. So again,
if I may,
yes, please.
Joanna,
Yes.
maybe just a couple of words on this. Well, first of all, I mean, regarding the, whether it's a race to the top, of course we want it to be a race to the top, but we also have to not forget where we started from, where we are, and there has been progress. We have ambitious plans regarding, what the GDP, for instance, of the EU could increase by circular economy, and that is like we envisaged of materials, to be and production to be circular. However, we are not there yet. We have only started this movement, if you like, 4 or 5 years ago. Of course, companies even started before, but we are putting ourselves in alliances with circular economy stakeholders. We have the stakeholder conferences that take place. We have a Circular Plastics Alliance, again, putting a target of 1 million tons. That's just 5 years from now. Of course, this is not enough, but we have to also take into account that, for instance, at the moment, the demand for recycled material is still very low. The costs of recycled material is still much higher than good quality recycled material. So companies are still, in a way, not sitting on the fence, but maybe have a good reason to prevaricate as to which direction to go. I think that the fact that there's such global for reducing emissions, also now with China's pledge of reducing emissions of being decarbonized 2060. I mean, all this adds to the momentum, but of course we have to keep working on the ground. And I really believe that the more that not only we share knowledge, the more that we share best practices, the more that we send very clear messages and roadmaps to the citizens in order to be really ready to take on the jobs and the re-engineering, if you like, of the skills that needs to be done for a circular rethinking of the economic and business model. I think the more we gain the momentum, and I think at that point, at various points along the road, we have to take the test, to take the temperature, and see what sort of increase in the ambition we can expect, especially in the content of recycled materials in certain products.
Great.
I would like to emphasize that there is no level playing field between virgin material and recycled material. And as long as that does not exist, a market will not function. Right now, we have a dysfunctional market there because there is no market. It's comparing apples with pears, and so that doesn't work. We need a level playing field. In Germany, you have plastic production is subsidized. That's crazy. But that's the case. The plastic production is subsidized because it doesn't have to pay certain taxes. And the recyclers have to pay the exact taxes that the plastic producers do not have to pay. As long as these kind of distortions, it will remain very difficult, and there's going to be pilots and niche developments, but the major stream of products will be produced with virgin material, at least for plastics.
Yeah, Martin, I see you wanted to comment on this.
Yes, I agree with my fellow presenters on the aspiration for 100% recycled material. And in fact, most 7th generation packaging is 100% PCR content. But to the point of Deputy Director General Drake, we have the world we live in today, and we have the world we aspire to create, and one needs to create a pathway One way to do this is through mandated minimums, which change over time. There are other mechanisms, but we cannot go from here to our North Star by teleportation. We need a plan, we need a path, and part of that, to Mr. Glaz's point, is to make sure there is a more level, no, in fact, there's a biased playing field with the bias toward the more sustainable approaches rather than away from them. So we need to envision that path, make sure that regulators are creating it and that companies are not only following it, but be going beyond it to reach that aspiration more rapidly.
Great.
If I may, Pascal,
Oh, please.
comment on this, Martin. I mean, yes, I agree. Of course, we cannot reach our north. I think policymakers have to offer the sense of direction and the sense of vision, but we also need to encourage businesses and citizens also to change by proposing a very clear roadmap to which the objectives the citizens can actually relate to. I mean, again, if I take the case of plastics, just to illustrate how the Commission has been now implementing this vision and giving policy direction, the directive on the single-use plastic says to the world that tackling effectively plastic waste, marine litter, it's not just a question of waste management, but it is a question of changing the design of the plastic products and of course, informing better the consumers, but not only informing them better, but also nudging them to make the right choices and to discard others that are more harmful. And therefore, you are thereby fostering changes in consumption patterns. Now, of course, this sort of engagement, this sort of clear messages, this sort of shifts in behavior needs to be entrenched in the system, but not only in the system of, what constitutes projects and what constitutes projects that are sustainable ones.
If I may briefly respond to that, I agree with all this that Ms. Drake is saying, but at the same time, we have the opinion that the current measures that have been declared in the European Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan will not be enough by far to meet the ambitious goals. So we agree on the goals. They are fantastic and they are ambitious, but these instruments will not meet the goals. We need several other things, including financial incentives to create this market that Timothy also described. Because if you make rules, for instance, if you make rules for the German car industry, different example, to meet certain standards, but at the same time, there is a market for SUVs, then who is going to buy these efficient cars that they have to produce? So you have to create a market to really drive investments and also get a return on investment, because that is what ultimately drives the companies.
So there are two, thank you all. There are two similar questions here, which are really, about talking about reducing primary natural resource. So it says the EU has suggested also an objective for reducing primary natural materials use. Would this be applicable to all fields? And how can we make it binding? And the other one was, are there any plans for greater integration of absolute limits, material and energy use? So does anyone want to tackle any of this around primary natural resource use and add anything to it?
David, I'm not in a position to answer that question because I'm not aware of what levels are being.
Okay. All right.
Well, I can say one thing, that the Dutch government already in 2016 has set the example to have a goal for to become 100% circular in 2050, whatever that may mean, and also 50% circular, including a 50% reduction of virgin material use. So that is a concrete example. And now, of course, the Dutch are 4 years further, and now they have to make it concrete. For instance, by setting a standard year to compare it with. But this could be a driver also for European policy to set such a goal.
Great. So if there are any other questions that want to come in, we'll take those. But you know, as we're coming in on the last part of this program, you know, maybe what we'll do is we'll turn to each of the speakers to see if there's any other pieces that you might want to add. So why don't we start this time with Timothy and work our way back through the agenda. Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, basically the problem or the challenge with creating this closed loop circular economy for plastics, it is very complex. And I think that's something that is, I find challenging also, because at the end of the day, we have to convince policymakers, and obviously we're not the only ones sending messages in that direction. So I think if you go into detail, then you will realize that you're not talking about plastic. You're talking about different materials, and each material has its properties and has its specifics. So that's again, it's very complex. That's one point I wanted to make. What I wanted to say is we need differentiated approaches depending on, is it PET, is it HDPE, for which application is it meant, and so on. The other point I want to make is the consumer. Being a consumer goods producing branded company, it's interesting to see what the consumer is thinking. Because at the end of the day, if the carrot doesn't really taste well, then the rabbit's not going to take it. So and that's something that's extremely important. So you have to try to figure out what the consumer really wants, and that's interesting because we realize, and I guess Mr. Wolf sees it in parallel also in the U.S. market, that the consumers are not only interested, but they want these kind of solutions. They want a solution for plastic. If the consumer collects at home and separates at home the packaging, and he wants to see something really happening with the packaging that makes sense. And I think sense is something that you always also have to think about, and bringing it back into a closed loop application, I think that makes a lot of sense. I know it doesn't always meet the absolute highest standard of whatever LCA. Maybe it could be achieved easier or with less environmental burden, but I think we always have to work together. Again, it's a collaboration, not only under with the policymakers or the supply chain, it's also with the consumers. And I think the role of the consumer is underestimated, and the consumer really wants to play an important role. That's a market research that came out of a study last year. We asked which are the most important players in creating a better environment product-wise. Of course, the manufacturers were number one, but the consumers rated themselves on number two. So they see themselves in a role that obviously is extremely important, but not always reflected in reality. Many things are decided without seeing what the consumer really wants. Many people talk about it. We're looking into what the consumer wants, but often the solution is not really meant to serve the needs and the wishes of the consumer. So I think we can be positive about that, because our market we are market leader in several categories, so we're not a niche, and the consumers is explicitly looking for solutions like ours, very sustainable solutions. And so let's be kind of more optimistic.
Great, thank you, Timothy. Martin, some closing thoughts?
Certainly, creating a circular economy is creating a systems change. And whenever you change a system, all the stakeholders in that system need to participate. Consumers want the convenience that our products offer, but they want also not to harm the environment. not by changing their actions and behaviors, but through the design of the products they purchase. So companies have should have an ambition to create products that meet that consumer need. That is, being convenient, but at the same time, not harming the environment. Businesses also have a role to play in being aware of the need for circularity and preserving our environment. To take the words that Mr. Oppel used a few moments ago from the Harvard article, what is the business case for circularity? It's the wrong question, because business is not bigger than our environment. The question really is, what is the environmental case for your business? What are you doing to make sure that our environment is sustainable and not harming the systems that sustain all of us? So thank you.
Great. Deputy Director, some closing thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I agree completely with the previous speaker. It's not about, the systemic change has to come from the rethinking, taking a few steps back and rethinking the model in order to plug yourself in to what the central momentum is, and that is sustainability. As I said at the beginning, we really have no choice but to go in it, but save ourselves and saves our living with the planet, and actually helping it to thrive, within the limits of the challenges that there are. Now, if COVID is, I think there are a lot of positives of COVID in a strange way, I say this, but I think it reminds us that we are really vulnerable. Our models have really been, whether it's governance, whether it's business, whether it's finance, it has been, duly disrupted. And I think the fragility has come out. But I think, therefore, we really have an opportunity here. We are really pushed to be in that spotlight of opportunity and focus more on sustainability, focus more on circularity. And thinking about how we're going to survive this, I think circularity and doing this with the economic crisis. So I don't think it's really a choice. It's really a must that we have to think in the terms and rethink how we are global environmental and sustainability challenges that we are all, that have been laid bare and are being laid bare in front of our eyes on a daily basis, and turn that into an opportunity.
Great, thank you so much. Thomas?
I'll just make 2 quick points. I think I completely agree with the idea that we can't get from where we would like to be from where we are tomorrow, or what was it, transporting ourselves, Martin, like Star Trek. However, I do think there are a couple things we can do. Somebody mentioned in the chat a U.S. legislation, House Bill 763, which would impose a gradually increasing carbon price, and I think that model, so that you create, both for business, consumers, and government, you create, instead of simply saying, all right, this is the floor, and we'll come back and look at the floor later on, of sort of establishing a series of steps that says, okay, we're going to do this. This is the minimum this year. In next year or 5 years or whatever the time frame is, we're going to raise that floor to this, and give businesses some ability to plan for those increases, as well as recognizing that we've got to be moving forward. I think is really important. The last point I'll make is, I think we all recognize on this call the connectedness of all of these problems. And so one of the things that ASBC is doing is we've launched a campaign with a coalition to look at the financing of the fossil fuel industry, which is obviously the major component for plastics, and talking to insurers who are supposed to be in the business of mitigating risk. And every financial or most major financial institutions, regulators, businesses, et cetera, now recognize the inherent risk in climate change, the inherent, the man-made nature of it, and the role of fossil fuels. And so, we've begun a campaign pushing insurers to reconsider both their investments in the fossil fuel industry and their willingness to insure future fossil fuel projects, pipelines, et cetera, to reconsider those. As and Timothy brought up the notion of subsidizing plastics, subsidizing fossil fuel industries. Again, we've got to take a more comprehensive approach to the problem.
Great, thank you, Thomas. Arthur.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I fully agree with all the last comments, especially the part of, about rethinking. This fully reflects also the opinion of the 3,000 companies in our membership. And for instance, this is one of the reasons why we are in favor of creating circular acceleration houses to help companies to rethink. At the same time, so economic incentives are not enough, but at the same time, you need them to create a level playing field, because if everybody starts to rethink, then the unlevel part of the playing field will become clear. And I would be very interested to hear from the US point of view, what the possibilities are in the US for extended producer responsibility, which is a market-based approach with proven track records, based now on waste management, but it can be extended to create circularity by using eco-modulation of the fees. So that would be a question for future investigation. And finally, I would like to thank the World Circular Economy Forum and the team at Citra for having us organize this side event. Thank you.
Great. And so I'd like to thank everyone again on behalf of Ecopreneur EU, the European Sustainable Business Federation, and the American Sustainable Business Council. We really appreciated everyone's participation in today's session on driving public policy to create a circular economy. And as we mentioned at the beginning of it, this is the first public event, but it's an indicator of the kind of cooperation that both Ecopreneur EU and the American Sustainable Business Council want to exact. As you heard, we both believe firmly in the role of responsible business to not only help to shift markets, but to actually engage in the public policy arena and to be there to help to sort of drive the solutions that we need to see in order to tackle these major problems that we face. Businesses have been a cause for many of the problems that we have, but likewise is represented from the thinking and some of the companies represented here today. We firmly believe that business can and should be using their voice and their power to help us drive the changes that we need for future generations to come. So thank you all for joining us today, and please be in touch so we could again move together in collaboration to drive change, on a more global scale. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thanks, everybody.